Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the EOB Podcast. Last weekend, we have three wide releases in theaters. We have Adrift, a movie that is based on a true story about a couple who cross, I think the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, one of the oceans, on a sailboat. And on their way, they encounter a huge storm, which caused them to be adrift in the ocean and trying to survive. And then we have the the sci-fi action thriller called Upgrade, directed by one of the writer and director of the Insidious movies. I think Insidious Chapter 3, Leigh Whannell, I think that's his name. Let me take a quick look. Leigh Whannell, I believe. Anyway, he wrote and directed this movie about a guy whose family got killed, and except he lived, his wife got killed, and then he's implanted with this experimental computer chip, which causes him to, upgrade himself because this chip can allow him to become this great action hero, being able to remove all his obstacles in the forms of these gangsters, and he went out for revenge, right? And then there is the R-rated comedy starring Johnny Knoxville. If you know him, you know his brand of comedy, which is about pretty much adults doing stupid things like hits to the groin, jumping, from high places, doing things that people shouldn't do. But they did anyway, right? So that's his new comedy action point about a guy who used to run an amusement park, a rundown amusement park. And of course, these low budget amusement parks, there's no safety procedures at all. And that's where the comedies come from. So let's see how this movie did at the box office. All right, before we get to those, let's start off with the number one movie of the weekend. We have Solo, a Star Wars story, which is the spin-off, right, in the Star Wars universe, focusing on Han Solo in his younger days, before he met up with Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, etc. And the rest of the story, right? This is him in his beginnings, before he became this rogue, this runner for the criminal underworld, right? Before he got the Millennium Falcon. Well, in this movie, he, that's how he got his that spaceship by winning the ship from Lando Calrissian, in a poker game. So this is the movie. I thought the movie could do way better than it did, because I said in the previous podcast that this movie is about Han Solo, one of the most beloved characters in the Star Wars universe. So I thought that his a story that's based on him, his beginnings, could do better, open way better than what we got, right? Let's see, I said the movie could open to 200 million plus at the box office, but it did not. I wasn't aware that Disney, in its infinite wisdom, released the movie on Memorial Day weekend. Historically a low point in the theater going experience, right? People usually travel or gather with families or what have you during these holidays, and historically, the box office is at a low at this point, but they decided to release Solo on this Memorial Day weekend. And it only opened to 84 million 3 days. 4 days is about 100 or so million, but it's way below what I thought it could open to, right? 200 million is a far cry from 84 million. Because I don't know, because if you take a look at the reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, I believe last I checked, it's a 71% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is, wow, certified fresh. Most of the critics enjoy the movie, right? But it's kind of the lowest reviewed movie, according to the tomato meter in the post George Lucas Star Wars movies. Lower than The Force Awakens, Rogue One, The Last Jedi, So this is the lowest of the new Star Wars movies, review-wise and box office-wise. It's actually pretty low as well. Rogue One opened to 155 million, a spin-off, but that one focused on the story of this group of characters. Trying to get the battle plan to kick off the first movie, A New Hope, right? To the I think the Death Star, to get the battle plan to the Death Star, and so that one did really well. And I thought that, hey, Han Solo, a movie about that could do way better, but no, it did not. It only opened to 84 million, and in its second weekend, it dropped huge, 65% in the second weekend to gross around 29 million over the weekend. So huge drop off. So that means the interest level is not there for the Solo movie. And then now the domestic gross for Solo, Star Wars Story, is 189 million domestic so far, right? And then in comparison to the Star Wars franchise, is right now at number 10. Because it's still early and it's only second weekend, right? Let's see, worldwide in the foreign markets is 115 million for worldwide gross of 264 million. So last weekend I said that the overseas market is not great. Around the teens for the openings. So it's not just here, it's just like worldwide the interest level for this spin-off Solo is not that huge. So what could be the problem, right? Is it a case of Star Wars overload? Like before we have a movie a movie every couple years. Right now Disney and then when Disney took over, it's pretty much like a movie every year, every Christmas. And then now with the spin-offs, we have one every 6 months. And what Disney did with the Marvel movies, right? They pretty much have a couple movies here and there throughout the whole year. So if they want to do to the Star Wars universe what they did to the Marvel's universe, then we could potentially have a Star Wars movie every couple months. Is that what the fans want? I don't know. And judging by the Solo, it could be a too much of a good thing, right? People have been clamoring when George Lucas was involved. He was dragging his feet with these movies, Star Wars movies. He didn't do anything with Star Wars until with the Phantom Menace, right? And then after he's done with that, he kind of like let it go again, like he thought he was done. Then he sold it off to Disney, and The Force Awakens, kind of like the highest grossing Star Wars movie ever, and then the various sequels and spin-offs, and now we have Solo. It could be just the story of Solo. And as I said, Solo is in relative terms the poorest reviewed Star Wars movie, right? Kind of like just ahead of Attack of the Clones, I believe. So in box office terms, it might gross as much as Attack of the Clones, which is kind of like one of the worst reviewed Star Wars movies. So Solo could be just that, and that's what I put in my title in my podcast last weekend. So that's Solo, a Star Wars movie. So we have to see in subsequent week. I expect a huge drop off in the third weekend as well, because the second weekend, huge drop off from there, from Star Wars fans, from people who are interested in Star Wars universe, even tangentially, because hey, what else are you going to watch in theaters right now, right? So if not Star Wars or one of the superhero movies like Deadpool or Avengers Infinity War. So Solo, a Star Wars story, doesn't hit it big with the fans of the the movies, nor with the, well, I mean, it is pretty popular with the general audience, but not as popular as the mainline storyline or even that spin-off with Rogue One. So we have to see moving forward if this is too much of a good thing, quote unquote, or meaning that people or fans are getting overloaded with Star Wars movies, or is this kind of like a blip, a outlier in the Star Wars movies, and we don't know that until we get more. the next one in the Star Wars universe. So until then, we will keep an eye out to see, right? So this huge drop off in the second weekend is very concerning because, hey, Disney will look at this and say, hey, what are we doing wrong? What we need to be fixed? And with Disney, they want to continue to milk this franchise. Of course, they will try to find out, and maybe they'll do better next time. All right, so let's move on to number 2, Deadpool 2, the sequel to Deadpool. Before Deadpool came along, the conventional wisdom was that a superhero needs to be PG or PG-13, to appeal to as wide of an audience as possible, or maybe that the target audience, or maybe teens, kids, and an R-rated movie doesn't fit into the conventional wisdom. And Deadpool came along, R-rated. They made an R-rated Deadpool, and the studio Fox didn't have high hopes for the movie. They only poured in about $58 million in the production, but then it blew up. It became the highest grossing R-rated superhero movie, or R-rated movie, pretty much. And Deadpool 2, while it didn't open as well as the first Deadpool, it came in second. It opened second. So it did well. If you compare to the first movie, yeah, it's kind of disappointing, but in the grand scheme of things, it actually did pretty well, right? As I said, Fox is happy with Deadpool 2's opening of 125 million. The first movie opened to 133 million. Deadpool 2 opened to 125 million. Domestic gross for Deadpool 2 right now is 254 million, and then internationally, worldwide, is at 598 million. So, and I believe this movie might not, as the first movie, might not open in China because of its R-rated nature. But still, it's going to do well for itself, and the budget for the second movie is 110 million, so not that far off from the first movie. So they got a higher budget for the second movie, and it's actually performing well, here and overseas as well, and of course excluding China. Since there are censorship issues with that country, Deadpool 2 might not open there. All right, let's move on to number 3. One of the new releases last weekend is surprisingly Adrift, a movie that I didn't have high hopes for. Let's see, Adrift I thought would open to about between 5 to 10 million. Because I thought that the movie stars Shailene Woodley, Sam Claflin, and Shailene Woodley, outside of her, Divergent movies, isn't that really big of a draw? Given that, and since this movie is kind of like based on true events, there might be some interest in this movie. So 5 to 10 million is my projection for this movie, but it opened a little bit better on the higher end, a little bit, above the higher end of my range, open to 11.5 million. So did a little bit better than what I projected to be the higher end of the movie. So surprising there, but the movie costs 35 million to make, and Adrift, I'm not sure how well it will stay in theaters. Let's use our real-time research in action to see how the movie did review-wise. So 71% on Rotten Tomatoes, and let's see, the cinema score for the movie, as measured by audience as they get out of theaters, is only a B. So that means people thought it was an alright movie, but not that great. So I don't expect the second weekend to be that huge or to hold on that well. Mainly because again, like I said in the preview, my projection in the last podcast is that Shailene Woodley is not a huge draw, nor is Sam Claflin. And this story, while there is some interest in that, it might not be that big of an interest. It's just pretty much a survival, survival movie in the middle of the ocean, with weathers, animals, sharks, etc. And I don't feel like there's a huge interest there, and the 11 million opening kind of reflects that. And the second weekend, I since it didn't open that huge, I expect to see the drop off in the, I guess, maybe 50s to 60s. So we'll see next weekend. It could hold on as well too. So since I was kind of pretty much off this weekend on the new releases, but we'll keep an eye out next week. All right, number 4, let's move along, is Avengers Infinity War. It pulled in about 10.4 million in the 6th weekend. Doing really well here, 642 million domestic already, and nearing 2 billion, 1.9 billion worldwide. So kind of like one of the biggest Avengers movie ever, right? It is. I think it is the biggest domestically. Yeah, so it already crossed the first Avengers movie as the highest Avengers movie domestically, and let's see worldwide. And it passed, and it's a top Avengers movie worldwide as well at 1.9. The Avengers is 1.5, and Age of Ultron is 1.4. So by all measures, Avengers Infinity War is kind of like the best of the Avengers movie so far, and it's continued to do well since the drop-off is 40% from its previous weekend. So you expect this movie to linger in theaters as well, right? People watching it multiple times, since this is one of the I guess the strongest Avengers movie, you expect it to linger in theaters, because I think Ultron is not a strong villain, as I said previously, and this one with Thanos, and this movie kind of like threw in the who's who in superhero movies, like Guardians of the Galaxy, Black Panther, who recently has a very successful movie earlier this year, Spider-Man, etc., etc. And all of them are in this movie, and it's like sort of a big deal, right? Because of all of them coming together to face a foe. And then of course there's the next Avengers movie to look forward to, because of what happened in this movie. All right, let's move along to number 5, Book Club, a movie that did surprisingly well counter programming. I thought the interest level was not high for this movie, opening wise, right? Because I said this movie target toward the older audience, and they generally don't usually rush out to catch these movies, but it did pretty well. It opened to about 13 million, higher than my projection, right? Let's see, I said the movie could open to about 5 million, but it did better than that. It opened to about 13.6 million. And then the drop off is about 32%, from the last weekend. So it held on. In this third weekend, it pulled in 6.8 million. So it's doing well, lingering in theaters, and 47 million domestic so far. So I expect this movie to keep going, and when it's all said and done, it could be in the 60 million. It could grow 60 million domestically. Let's move on to number 6, which is one of the new releases last weekend. A movie that I thought could open to 10 to 15 million because it's directed by one of the writer-director of the Insidious movies, right? Leigh Whannell. And it did not open to that much. It only opened to about 4.5 million. The premise is interesting, right? It takes place in the future, about this guy and his wife. His wife got killed by a group of bad guys. Him left as a quadriplegic, couldn't move his limbs, and then this scientist guy came and offered him a sliver of hope, in the form of this computer chip, and this chip, it talks to him. It's pretty much a computer, and it allows him to regulate his bodily functions, etc., and turn him into this killing machine. And he went out to get revenge for his wife. I thought we could do better than what it did, right? 10 to 15 million, because hey, there's always room for a good action movie. But the concerning thing is, Upgrade, it didn't star anybody who could pull in the crowd. Star Logan Marshall Green. Well, he's kind of well known. He's not that big of a draw, right? And for some of these movies, you need a name. But this movie is produced by Jason Blum. He of the low budget horror movies. He recently branched out into sci-fi, superhero movies, and this is one of his action thriller movies. Low budget, of course. So if this, given that it's produced by Jason Blum and the budget is kind of, pretty low, I believe, the opening is okay, decent, right? And he's trying new things. producing all these low budget movies, and it's gonna have good returns for him and his collaborators. So 4.6 million. So we'll see if it continues to linger in theaters. I think it'll drop off from there, obviously, but will it have a strong hold, right? Will it close out at maybe 20 million? We don't know. We'll have to see what it'll be the next weekend. All right, let's move on to number 7, which is Life of the Party, the Melissa McCarthy movie, a movie that she wrote and directed by her husband, Belle Falcone. It pulled in 4.5 million over the weekend. Drop off is only about 36%, so it kind of stabilized there. Domestic gross right now is 46 million. As I said previously, her collaborations with her husband, the box office grosses, openings have been dropping until we get to Life of the Party here. Maybe they'll hit one out of the ballpark, but considering right, it's still doing okay for a comedy. Probably the budget's not that high, but still, when in comparison to her other big hits, it's lacking. All right, let's move on to number 8, which is Breaking In. The movie starring Gabrielle Union. She turned into Supermom, a movie that opened during Mother's Day. It's doing actually pretty well. Pulled in 2.8 million in its 4th weekend. Domestic gross right now is about 41 million, and the budget is only 6 million. Right? Doing pretty well. I didn't have high hopes for this movie. I thought it could open. What did I thought it could open to? Yeah, Breaking In, I thought it could only open to about 5 million or so, but it opened way better than that. It opened to about 17 million. Again, this movie is targeted toward the African American audience, and of course they know who Gabrielle Union is. She has her own movie career, and then she's married to NBA star Dwayne Wade, who's playing for the Miami Heat right now. And so there is the name recognition there, either by her herself or by her association with the NBA star Dwayne Wade. So that's why the movie, I think, have an awareness. It's different. It is not an erotic thriller. Like as previously, this one is an action thriller, similar to the ones, kind of similar to the ones that Taraji B. Henson was starring in, right? She was in, what's that movie? Assassin, where she plays an assassin and she took on this boy and had a change of heart, etc. Kind of like that, right? It's kind of they're trying to do something different, no longer like a love triangle, erotic thrillers. So they're doing more actiony figures. More action movies, and this one is kind of a modest hit for the movie that's targeted toward the African American audience. That is not an erotic thriller, or not a comedy. And so there it goes. Breaking In, is a success in that sense. All right, so number 9, moving on, is kind of a disappointment to me, right? A movie, a comedy, R-rated comedy, starring Johnny Knoxville. And if you know his brand of comedies, you know what you're going to get for this movie. It's kind of a continuation of his Jackass movies about, like I said, adults doing stupid things. A movie I thought could open to 20 to 25 million, because based on his previous movies, even though I'm not a fan of those, opened that to that much. And I thought this movie, if you judge it by his previous openings of his other movies, I thought it could open to that much. But maybe people caught on, or his brand of comedy is not that passe, so to speak. Or maybe that people are not that interested, right? So it pulled in 2.3 million. It opened to 2.3 million. Budget is 19 million. It goes to show it could be, like I said, it could be an outlier in his filmography, because stupid comedies, action comedies, has a place, but for some reason, Action Point just failed to capture the imagination, I guess, of the audience, of the people, of his fans. So we might see him kind of lay low for a while with his type comedies, but 2.3 million is not going to cut it. And as you know, this was one of these movies, that's not going to be saved by the overseas market, because comedies, because cultural differences, language barrier, don't travel well. And I don't expect this movie to be huge overseas. So, but the budget is low, 19 million. I think they can recover the money through home video, streaming services, etc. All right, let's close out the top 10 with Overboard, a remake of the Kurt Russell Goldie Hawn comedy. It pulled in about 1.9 million or 2 million over the weekend, in this fifth weekend. So it's kind of like a modest hit right now. Domestic gross is 45 million. So I guess it's gonna be a modest success for Eugenio Derbez, because that's what his movies usually make. All right, so that rounds out the top 10. Let's move on to the new releases. We have 3 wide releases. Let me close some tabs first of all. We have 3 releases. We have a sort of a horror movie called Hereditary, starring Toni Collette, Gabriel Byrne, Alex Wolff, and Millie Shapiro. About a family whose matriarch just recently passed, and then strange things starting to happen, and they're starting seeing visions, etc. And people start dying, and in the trailer, if you watch the trailer, people getting on fire, etc. So it is a horror movie in that sense. It's not a grotesque movie, as judging by the trailer. It's not blood and guts. It's one of these tense movies, more clean, trying to scare you that way. And it's released by A21, and it's by the people who made The Witch, which is kind of like a mini success for A24. Oh no, it's released by A24, not A21. So I thought Hereditary is the most interesting of the 3. Because again, it's a horror movie that has then tried to gross you out through bloods, and doesn't try to and then just not a typical teenage horror movie is what I'm trying to say. It's more in the kind of like the Conjuring movies, the kind of in the Insidious movies. So scares coming from the tension there. And Toni Collette, of course, is always a reliable actress. And I thought this movie could open, in the 5 to 10 million range. I wouldn't be surprised if it opens more, but I don't know how wide this movie is. It's just nationwide. So, if it's not limited by the theater count, I think this movie could open higher. But if it is, it's probably on the lower end of my range, 5 to 10. So, so I thought this Hereditary is the more interesting, most interesting of the 3 wide releases. All right, let's move on to Hotel Artemis. Stars Jodie Foster, Sofia Boutella, Dave Bautista, Jeff Goldblum, and Zachary Quinto, and Charlie Day's in there. Foster plays a nurse who's heading up a hospital for criminals. When they get injured, they turn up and get healed, and there are rules. In this hospital, you don't kill each other, you don't bring guns in this place, etc. And then Jeff Goldblum plays this guy who's looking for diamonds that got smuggled in or whatever, and they have a standoff. And it reminds me of the John Wick movies, right? This Hotel Continental, right? A place for hitmen, assassins to kind of chill out, to relax. And to do whatever, right? And once you get out of this hotel, you can do whatever you want, but inside you have to follow the rules. And Hotel Artemis is kind of like that, except hey, it's headed up by Jodie Foster, who plays this wacky wacky doctor, and kind of an out of character for her. She seems kind of off here. So I'm not feeling this way. Foster stands out, and not her portrayal of this character stands out, and I don't think it's in a good way. It's more laughable than anything, right? Than believable. So And this movie is written and directed by the writer of Iron Man 3 and Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, right? He's making his feature directorial debut. Again, I'm not feeling this movie. It's kind of like John Wick, except it's from the viewpoint of the hotel people. So I think 5 million or so, I think, is the opening for this movie. Like I say, my interest level, is not high for this, and I think people, again, the people, Jodie Foster playing a character. Dave Bautista has his fans from the wrestling days and other, right? But again, he's playing a supporting role. So 5 million, I wouldn't be surprised if it opened a bit higher, but then I'm going with 5. All right, let's close out this podcast with Ocean's 8, a spin-off / sequel or reboot, whatever, to the Ocean 11 movies. Starring an all-female cast, as the lead, right? We have Sandra Bullock, we have Cate Blanchett, we have Anne Hathaway, Mindy Kaling, Sarah Paulson, Rihanna's here, Helena Bonham Carter. These characters come together and try to rob the Metropolitan Museum of Art during its annual ball. And they get to glam up, attend the party, and have all sort of high-tech stuff. But there has already been 3 Ocean 11 movies, with the George Clooney and Matt Damon, right, and Brad Pitt. They did pretty well, right? The first movie opened to 38 million, 183 million domestic, 450 million worldwide. The second, movie, Ocean's 12, kind of stayed there, opened to about 39 million, 125 domestic, and 362 million worldwide. So, and Ocean's 13, 36 million, 117 million domestic, and 311 million worldwide. So the opening is kind of relatively there, stable, but then the domestic and the worldwide gross continue to drop, if not by much, right? And then we have Ocean's 8, starring an all-female cast. Remember, we have the Ghostbusters reboot starring an all-female cast. That one kind of was disappointing, I guess, considering, right? And then Ocean's 8, or will people be kind of receptive to this? It's kind of like, oh, it's the same movie except it's starring a female cast. Do people want to kind of watch that? That it's kind of more like gimmick casting. So I don't think this Ocean's 8 will do that well. It won't open to in the 30s. I think it might have trouble opening in the 20s as well, but I was surprised if it gets there because of the name involved, right? All these leading actresses previously, so I think this movie could open lower. I think it could open between 15 to 20 million, but I wouldn't be surprised if it opened, in the 25 million range. But I'm going with low because, again, I don't see anything there that offers anything new. It's just kind of like Ocean's 11 except with a female cast, gimmick casting, as I said. So I was wrong last weekend with my projections for the new releases. I could be wrong this week as well, but hey, these are my feelings because like I said, I wasn't high on this week's new releases other than Hereditary, and that one could be limited by the theater count. So we'll see. All right, tune in next week and see how I did with my projections. Until then, take care. Bye bye.